A pension crisis looms over the developed world. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. The Globe and Mail published an article titled France is having a pension crisis. Why isn't Canada? Well, before we dive into that, I want to note that much of the developed world is actually facing a pension crisis. Not just France, and Canada is facing one too, but to a lesser degree. Now, all of this is a symptom of a larger phenomenon. We have an aging population crisis across all of the developed world. That includes China, Japan, America, Italy, France, South Korea, Canada, you name it. Old people are living longer due to improved healthcare and quality of life, which is a good thing. But pair that with another fact. The birth rates have plummeted in these same countries. There are less workers, there is a declining next generation, and more people are requiring things like healthcare and pensions. That formula is troubling. That means less funding, as income tax is a large portion of that puzzle, and if you have less workers, there's a smaller tax base, while there's an increase in demand for public services, which cost money. Generally, older citizens have more problems than younger people. That includes things like health and finances, and therefore, with a population that's getting heavier on that side, we'll have to beef up those services. For some numbers, in 1960, 8% of Canadians were seniors. In 2021, that figure was 19%. So it's more than doubled, and that trajectory continues to grow. Now, focusing in on the pension situation, because there are a ton of issues that come with an aging population. And as I said, the pension crisis is just one factor there. There are things like healthcare and economies to consider. But back to the pension, you have to ask yourself, how does a pension work? Well, the entire concept is that it's going to provide an income for someone who can no longer be employed. And that's going to naturally happen to those who are older. They simply don't have the abilities or the health status or whatever it is to continue to provide labor. And oftentimes many just want a break. It's a personal choice. Now, many of these individuals who wish to retire do not have adequate savings to provide for themselves. Therefore, the government has to step in, and here comes the idea of a pension. Essentially what happens is that workers today pay into the pension to fund old people who are currently needing that source of income. And the idea is that when the current working class has to retire, the next generation of workers will fund their pension, and so on. In some ways, I've seen this online, it's described as a chain of IOUs. You pay for them, someone pays for you, and that continues. Now, as we just illustrated, that becomes a disaster when the amount of people who need to collect a pension payment far outweighs the amount of people who are paying into one. There's a massive imbalance here. There are a ton of people who are about to retire, or who are currently retired, and we have a workforce that continues to decline. And with a further declining birth rate, the issue is going to prolong itself. Now, there are things countries can do, and every country has a unique approach or a unique non-approach to the matter. For example, in Canada, we filled these labor gaps mainly through immigration. But in a country like Japan or South Korea, where it is more tricky to immigrate because of things like the language barrier, that's not truly an option for them. They have to do something to kickstart their internal birth rate, and that's difficult. It's a concrete global trend that when economies become advanced, birth rates do decline, and there are many reasons for that. One of it is just simple personal choice, another is greater education, another is understanding things like contraceptives, another is perhaps not needing as much labor to do something like tend your field, and there are many things here. Another thing is people are busy, they're working, they might not be able to have 5 kids like they did in the past. So all these factors play a role in the phenomenon that we're seeing. Now, France is in the spotlight because there are many protests going on. What's had to happen is Macron has suggested that they raise the age of retirement. They need people to work longer so they can gather more taxes from them and they can prolong paying those out. And I believe he's only requesting something like a 2-year increase, but even that's being met with a ton of resistance. The fact of the matter is that it's difficult to find an agreeable solution because someone always loses. If you extend the age of retirement, people who are working right now are going to be upset. Why should they have to work an extra 2 years? They want to retire as the previous generation did. Then you can suggest, well, okay, if we don't want to change the age, we have to raise the actual pension percentage that we claw from your salary. If it's something like 5%, we have to make it 7%. They're not going to like that either. Then on the other side of the equation, you can do something with those who are collecting the pension. You can decrease the payouts. Well, they're going to be upset. What else can you do? You can raise immigration numbers, but other people are going to be upset about that. There isn't a clear-cut answer that's going to appease everyone here. This is what happens when you have that chain of IOUs. There are parties that are adverse to each other. Not every individual in this game has the same objective. And typically, helping one side, whether those who are working, or the tax base, or those who are collecting the pension, is going to upset the other. Now, looking at Canada, how did we avoid a major crisis? The article writes that in the 1990s, our finance minister, Paul Martin, and his provincial counterparts chose to face the math of the issue. What they did was they gradually doubled the Canadian pension plan premium, so they took more money from people, but they did that to ensure that pensions will be paid into the future indefinitely. And what they did too was they took a more financial viewpoint to the pension. They didn't want to just collect taxes and transfer that to seniors. They took your taxes and they created investments with it. The Canadian Pension Investment Board. They managed the money and they invested into different assets so it would grow. Currently, that pension investment plan stands at $536 billion. They created a massive savings account and they put the money to work. They didn't just take it and pay it out. And that really is a genius idea. It's how Canada is positioned so well, at least compared to our peers. Now, across the border in America, things are quite different. According to the article, Republicans have long advocated for averting calamity via cutting, gutting, or privatizing the national pension plan known as Social Security. Democrats propose the opposite, namely higher benefits paid for by higher premiums. And it's interesting because of the current climate there is no agreement, there is no middle ground. The right is pushing for their solution, and the left is pushing for theirs. Now, the Congressional Budget Office says that unless premiums are raised, the deficit is increased, or taxpayers kick in cash, pension benefits will have to shrink 23% by 2033. So that's quite soon. And for the pension payments to drop by nearly a quarter, that's insane. People are already struggling to get by. Imagine how much inflation is going to accrue in the next decade. So it's clear that they have to do something over in America. They'll either have to do, as the budget office says, increase the amount they collect or decrease the amount they pay out. That's truly the two levers you have to pull. Even though France, America, and Canada have different situations, it's clear we're all suffering from the same thing. And we can analyze other countries around the world, including China, Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, any of them. A declining population is a crisis, and there's so much more to say on that topic. The pension is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many destabilizing factors that come into play once you have a population that's not replacing itself. It's interesting because it seemed like not too long ago, many people were afraid of an overcrowding effect on the earth, but it seems like things are changing. As developing countries become more developed, and as developed nations face super low birth rates, it's not impossible to imagine that in the near future, we face an underpopulation crisis, where we need more people. And that's quite insane to think about. As I said, it wasn't too long ago that we thought the opposite was the case. Now, with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.